Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Herald Inside LI. I'm your host, Skye. I'm here tonight to bring you answers to your questions about applying to college, a stress-inducing time for many high school seniors and their families, which has become even more stressful during the pandemic. How can we best provide you the answers you seek? Herald Community Newspaper Group is one of the top 5 community news organizations in New York State, and we are committed to supplying you with the facts. Real, local, real news. We launched Herald Inside LI in August with the goal of engaging with our audience in a new way via virtual conversations with decision makers themselves right here on the screen. I'd like to thank tonight's sponsor, Molloy College. Based in Rockville Center, Molloy College provides more than 50 academic undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral degree programs for over 5,000 students. Their mascot is a lion, hence my lion print jacket. As a reminder, tonight's webinar is recorded. So for anyone who's watching, if you like what you see, you can send the link to tonight's recording to your friends, family, and colleagues. It'll be available first thing tomorrow morning on our website, liherald.com/insideli. As our audience signed up for this webinar tonight, they had the option to submit questions in advance, which I will incorporate into tonight's discussion. And for any questions that arise from anyone who's watching in real time, you can submit questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions. I will pose them to the panelists. So joining me this evening, we have Anthony DeMartinis, Assistant Principal of School Counseling and Wellness at Calhoun High School in the Bellmore-Merrick School District, where he oversees counselors, psychologists, and special ed departments. We have Frank Muzio, Director of Guidance for the whole Wantagh Union Free School District. We have Bethany Goldszer, who's the owner of Standout College Prep, where she serves as a liaison between parents and high school counselors and parents and colleges. And Marguerite Lane, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management of Molloy College. Thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight. And as I do with all of our webinars, I like to keep the conversation candid and conversational. So please, panelists, feel free to chime into each other's responses as we discuss applying to college. And before I pose my first question, I'd like to take a selfie, and this picture of us on the screen will appear in next week's edition of the paper with a recap of tonight's conversation. So smile. Thank you. So Marguerite, let's begin with you. As you're responsible for enrollment at Molloy College, tell us what many people are wondering. How are you evaluating applicants this year differently than you had in the past? And what's your best advice to students seeking college admission?
Okay, thanks, Skye. I think one of the fortunate things about Molloy College is we always had a holistic approach when we evaluate students. So we always looked at more than the academic average and the test scores that appeared on a student's transcript and in their file. This year, with the absence of many students having test scores and Molloy going test optional like many of our peer institutions, we have to look even beyond the academic transcript, as we always do, but we have to dig a little deeper. So we're certainly looking at the academic transcript. We're looking at a rigor score to see what type of coursework did the students take. Were they an honors program, AP coursework, college level, looking at all of that. And then looking beyond that, did they have leadership roles in their high school, in clubs, in organizations? Were they involved in community service? Looking at their essay to see what type of impact the whole climate, the whole change of climate in our whole country has had upon them. So we look for what the entire picture of a student and to see if if that student's going to really be a good fit for Molloy, if this is really going to be a good institution and help them develop in their academics and in their career.
I want to hear what our other panelists have to say about what they advise their students, but I have a follow-up question, which is a lot of students are concerned about their junior year grades that have been impacted at the end of last year with this pandemic, and how is Molloy assessing that part of their resume or their application?
Sure. I think Molloy and most colleges are aware of the fact that everyone was really just thrown into remote learning with the pandemic. There really wasn't much warning. It was just suddenly everyone was virtually doing classroom experience. So we understand that the junior year might not be a true indicator of a student's abilities. So we're looking at the sequence. We're looking how they did in freshman, sophomore, and junior year. You're gonna have to look at the whole student and see, was it just a bump in the road, or is that the true academic picture? So we understand, and there's no Regents grades from junior year for New York students. So we look towards the Regents from freshman and sophomore year as indicators.
Anthony, let's go to you. Similar questions with your student body. How are you advising students differently, and students that are concerned about their performance, over the last couple of months?
Well, you mentioned junior year, Skye, and that's really when the college process planning begins. And if you think back to last year, the winter of junior year is when we went remote and left school. And that's when a lot of the college counseling sessions would have started with the counselors. And so the counselors here had to pivot to utilizing Remind and Zoom and Google Classroom to keep in touch with their kids and to meet with their parents. And I think the counselors here did a fantastic job of starting that conversation, of having those meetings and having the kids prepare into the summertime, because that's when a lot of the work for the college process needs to get done, is over that summer of junior year leading into senior year. So we always think of the process kind of a multifaceted approach. You have the nuts and bolts of the process, which is the application itself, the SAT or ACT if they're going to submit them. And then the piece that comes from high school. All three of those pieces are really, really important, and they all need to get submitted, maybe with the exception of the SAT and the ACT this year. But you also have the planning itself, the list of schools, the research into the different majors that are offered. And that's really the biggest change that I've noticed in the counselor meetings with the students this year. It's, okay, well, we're in a COVID world now. And if that doesn't change next year, is that going to affect the list of schools to which you're applying? Do we need to maybe think about having some local options, even though you were really looking to go away for school? Is that wise? And of course, how does the financial situation for the family play into that decision making? So it's become, like Marguerite talked about her process becoming more holistic. I think the counseling process at the high school level has become more holistic, looking at the whole picture and the whole plan for the student.
Frank, would you say the same, coming from a high school perspective and guidance?
Absolutely, I'm nodding because we have to look at students not only holistically but individually. I think that's really the task of has always been for counselors, but more so now, because students have adapted to this new normal in different ways and at different paces. And so we really had to, do a lot of individual counseling over a medium like this, and to meet students and families where they are. And some families are off and running and they know how to do the Common App, and that's fine. But our counselors also have been doing Common App workshops individually with their students. And I did one earlier in September. And so we really have to try to meet the needs of a real spectrum of needs. And another thing I want to throw in is we're kind of training our students to live in an uncertain world. And up until this point, they really have had an experience that has been middle school, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and there's kind of a predictability about it. And now they're going to enter this very uncertain world. So to piggyback on what Anthony said, we're going to have some local schools on there, and we're going to have some out-of-state schools, and we're going to really try to look at very different possibilities and to cover all those bases financially and from a health standpoint and from where they are from a mental health standpoint. So I find that students are applying to more colleges. They have an open mind about some colleges they may not have thought of before. And we have an open mind as counselors, just to try to, again, meet them where they are.
And Bethany, now you work with students from not only just Long Island, but across the country. And I would imagine you're very, very busy. I hear of families hiring different types of professionals to help their kids get into college and help them with the application process outside of their high school guidance counselor. So are you hearing that people are expanding their reach, like Frank suggested, and applying to more schools? And is it more competitive this year because people are expanding their reach?
So a couple of things. First, I echo everything that was said previously, especially about around the holistic admissions. What I'm seeing is an interest that I've never seen before in parents and really trying to understand the nuts and bolts of the process. And there are various reasons behind that, but one of the biggest ones that I've seen is that counselors, in having to make that transition into remote learning, were inundated with a lot of logistical shifts. And so they hadn't had the opportunities to work with students in the way that they previously had on the admissions process. So 90% of what I offer to families is free because I had to go and create a lot of content, workshops. I ran all summer, to Anthony's point about summer being a critical time when people prepare. I had to run summer workshops that I offered for free. I had tons of resources on my website. I started to do more content creation as opposed to the one-to-one counseling work because the need was so great. I had people writing me all over the place saying, you know, they had a lot of questions about holistic admissions, about SAT optional, about how they can get an essay done if school's not in session, but it's something that they'll need to have for the admissions process because they hadn't had the contact with counselors that they previously had. So I think that there's a lot of hysteria, there's a lot of confusion, but there's also interest that we haven't seen. And then in addition to that, in terms of the competitiveness, it's really nuanced. I would say for some schools, I would say for some of the more elite schools, chances might be better now because there is a move to students applying hyper local now because there's, the thought is if school is going to be remote next year, I don't want to spend $60,000 on tuition and go away to, a top tier school. Some students don't care. They want to go to a top school. So for many of those students, chances might be better this year and next year, depending on where they fall in their class. And then another piece is financial aid. Financial aid has been more of a conversation that I've had with families in recent years, particularly on Long Island. So I've had to do more workshops around, how middle-class families can get financial aid. It's no longer an option to fill out the FAFSA. You have to fill out the FAFSA this year because you just don't know. Schools are buying students this year because applications are down and they're going to need to make up somehow.
Now, yes. Go ahead. Oh, I thought someone wanted to say something. No, I want to talk about financial aid, but I also want to talk about with admissions. You mentioned if it's more competitive. What about the kids who deferred? A lot of kids were accepted last year and then they deferred their admission to this year. How will that impact the process for other kids?
Not very much is what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, just because again, applications were down. I last read that applications were down about 8% than what they anticipated for the early decision cycle. It's probably going to be down even more for the regular decision cycle. So it's not going to have that big of an impact. I think I even saw that the Common App just released a mobile app today, because they're trying to figure out how they can get more people to apply. So I think that this is the year, if you are interested in applying and getting into a more competitive school, I do believe this is the year to do it.
Wow, look at that. And the app, that's cool. Marguerite, are you seeing that more kids are applying, you're getting more applications? Because as Bethany mentioned, kids are looking to stay local. Right. So are you seeing that?
I think our applications right now are pretty much exactly on par where we were with last year, which is very positive for me, looking at that through this lens, because students right now, they're saying they're 3 months behind in the process because they missed, as Anthony was talking about earlier, they missed that whole planning of the end of junior year, trying to get all that information. Everyone, the anxiety level, the stress of going remote, the stress of the pandemic really just changed the whole landscape. So they're starting out almost 3 months behind. So what they're saying now, the experts, is that, what applications we're seeing now in November is you can compare that to where you were last year, 3 months ahead. So we feel pretty positive about it. I think that more students on the island will think about staying local for all the reasons that we talked about, including the financial aid aspect for sure.
And I wonder if, I think Bethany mentioned it before, if that has to do with access to counselors, access to that help, and adjusting to the hybrid learning model and the remote learning model. Bellmore-Merrick, we've been very lucky. After the first several weeks of the year, we transitioned to a full in-person model in addition to the hybrid and the remote option. So students were able to get in touch with their counselors very soon into the year. And we actually had our senior small group meetings with students as we normally would. So access has been really positive here, but I'm wondering, as students across the island now figure out how they're going to meet with their counselors, whether that's via Zoom or Google, now they're going to start to catch up. And I would advise any student who's wondering about the nuts and bolts, what needs to get done and when, to contact your counseling office and ask them for a checklist or a timeline or just a list of things that need to get done and when, because they will have those resources for you and they will be happy to share them. And this process, although cumbersome and somewhat complicated, if you sit down and you do it in chunks, it's very easy to complete over the course of several days, and you can certainly do it, and you can do it well.
It's overwhelming and cumbersome, like you said, but one step at a time. And I think the first step, you would all agree, is the students being proactive about it. Right, Frank?
They have to know where to start, and we really try to get them active early, and we have a sophomore night, and we have freshman decision-making programs, and we have we do that, and some kids adhere to it and they're ready for that, and other kids aren't. But to pick up on Anthony's point, my school hasn't been as lucky in that we've been on a hybrid model, and I know many schools in our area have been on that hybrid model. So it's been just something that we've been groping through, to how to get this information, how to get this instruction to kids and families. I think one of the positives has been when we do meet with seniors, when they're in the building, the parent, now this is a norm. Now we can meet on this kind of a platform, and the parent can still be at their job, or they could be at home. And so I'm finding that the parental participation can be increased in some ways because of this. So that's been a positive. We just have had to adapt the way we give this kind of instruction. I found that our students have adapted very well. And but we have a saying in our office called, shake the trees, and sometimes it's just that's what we're up to right now. Like, who haven't we seen? Who hasn't applied? Who hasn't been in our office in a while? Let's make sure that they have a plan. And it's proactive on the part of the student, but it's also proactive on the part of the staff as well.
Now, we touched on financial aid. I'd like to dive more into that topic. After completing these FAFSA forms, what are some additional steps that need to be taken for financial aid purposes when you're advising a student and their family? And let's start with you, Frank.
In terms of FAFSA and financial aid? Yes.
Oh, there's Stuart. Hello, Stuart. The publisher of Herald Community Newspaper Group.
Hello, Stuart. We encourage our families to file the FAFSA, and I have been getting a question now and then of, if I know I'm going to pay full freight, should I still file a FAFSA? And that's a difficult question. And what I say is, colleges shouldn't take that into account if you're applying for financial aid. And that's our answer. And families really do make up their own decision. We had 2 financial aid nights so far this year, one for high school and actually one for middle school, just to get them started on this road. And but we try to get them to think of things like, in academics, we say a safety school, a reach school, and a range school. We do the same thing with finances. And so there are some schools that are going to be financial reaches. There are going to be some schools that are going to be financial safeties, and some schools right in that range. So we ask students to apply to schools on that kind of a range as well, regardless. then. If they only apply to schools that are $60,000, $70,000 a year, that's their choice, and it's, you know, at their own peril. But we do advise them to apply to others.
Bethany, how do you work with clients when it comes to financial aid and what to look for and how to you know, take on the process?
So yeah, that's one of the key things I work on. I specialize in helping middle-class families, particularly ones in Long Island that are making anywhere from $75,000 to $400,000 a year, get as much as 50% off of the cost of tuition. And so I encourage everyone fills out the FAFSA form. Colleges buy students. So if a college really wants you to attend, and this has just been my experience with the 1,000+ students that I've worked with over the last 15 years, in that if they really want a student, they will entice that student to come, and they will make it feasible for their families to afford it. So I mean, I've had families that, you know, live on North Shore, Long Island, that are making over $300,000 a year, go to Johns Hopkins and pay, you know, $10,000 to $15,000 a year for that type of education, because Johns Hopkins really wanted that student to attend. And they look at the whole picture. So, you know, the FAFSA only determines eligibility. The CSS profile goes a little bit deeper into your eligibility, but the process of actually securing financial aid is a conversation with a human being in the financial aid office of the college that you get admitted into. So you should definitely fill it out, particularly if you have plans to attend a private school, whether it's on Long Island or not, and you know that you are a desired student there, because it can give you some leverage when it comes to the negotiation part. And you shouldn't let people who have had an experience with a school say that school doesn't give money, because you have to, students are looked at even more so this year as individuals. And so again, it really comes down to, are you desired? What other schools have you gotten into? And how badly does that school want you to get there? And then what your whole situation is. So even though families have high incomes, if there's medical expenses, if there are high other expenses, property taxes, there's lots of debt, colleges are really willing to look at those situations and come up with a better deal, provided that you're a desired student.
Now, someone asked, based on my FAFSA, I don't believe I'm eligible for need-based financing. Do I still need to complete the CSS?
So if you have to fill out the CSS profile, that's a good sign that you're applying to a school that is better about giving out finances. So again, FAFSA only tells the school that you're eligible for need-based scholarships. Some schools require, need-based financial aid. Some schools require the FAFSA in order for you to get merit scholarships. It literally takes 20 minutes to fill out the FAFSA. You should fill it out. Another reason why it's a good idea to fill out the FAFSA, especially these days, is if the FAFSA truly shows you are a full pay student, it can actually make your admissions chances higher, because some schools, so let's example, NYU wants full pay students. So if you can show that you are, and you legitimately are, then you are going to be in another pool and have better chances at a school like NYU.
Now, there are different scholarship opportunities from third parties. And at the high school level, is this a conversation? I know, Frank, you mentioned you have these financial aid nights beginning with middle school parents. Is it something introduced into the conversation? When should parents start worrying about it, or thinking about it rather?
Well, we don't want them to worry about it. That's why, you know,
they worry.
They worry. I mean, I do. I'm a parent myself. We thought that, you know, by the time they get to high school and they attend our financial aid night, when they're parents of seniors, they say, oh my God, I wish I knew about a 529 plan. I wish I had known about, I would have done something, you know. And so we said, why don't we do this for our middle school parents, just so they get an idea of how the system works. And we not only talk about financial aid, we also talk about just preparing your student, your child for high school, and developing skills to eventually become a college student. So it's just an early intervention type of an approach.
And from opportunities, Anthony, what do you offer, and what conversations have you had with parents as far as different scholarship opportunities and when parents should seek out these things?
So we typically counsel them through the different types of opportunities, and there will be institutional based opportunities, which are typically merit based. So off of the strengths of a student's application, an admissions officer will sit and say, well, they're going to fall into the 85th percentile of applicants, we normally accept. So we're going to give them X number of dollars to entice them in a way to come and study here and raise the caliber of our student academic body. So that's merit-based scholarships, which would differ from college to college, and those are really subjective and institutional based. There are private scholarships and grants that are available to students as well. Fastweb.com is a resource that we share frequently for a couple of different reasons. One, it's a free resource. Any of the scholarship resources that look to charge you, I would say that's a big red flag. A lot of this information is freely available and should be so. And the basic idea behind FastWeb is each student creates an individual profile of their interests, their activities, any work experience, and then their matrix kind of searches through all the different scholarships that are out there and will email the student and say, hey, this scholarship might fit your profile. You may want to apply here. So those are typically the two different ways that our students will get scholarship money for school. The outside scholarships, the fastweb.com scholarships, those are of course not guaranteed because there's going to be students from all over the country that are applying to those. But I would say that they're definitely an underutilized source of scholarship money. I would say for every 100 students that we say go to this website, I don't know, maybe 5, maybe 10, Frank, I don't know if you'll agree, actually go and pursue them and fill out that application. So those are a couple of the different ways that we counsel students for scholarship money.
Marguerite, do you see a lot of kids applying with financial aid as part of their application?
Yeah, we certainly encourage all of our students who apply to fill out the FAFSA. It's really important. I wouldn't agree so much with Bethany in the term, we don't buy students at Molloy, but we do like to look beyond the FAFSA. So most colleges have institutional aid that's discretionary. So if there are needs that are evident, as Bethany and Frank and Anthony were saying, that are not showing up on the FAFSA, there's medical bills or there's family care that they're providing, that can certainly be adjusted in their financial aid eligibility with institutional aid. And also Molloy is mission-based. So it's definitely part of our mission to work with students, first-generation college students, and make Molloy as affordable as possible for all the students, because it really is part of our mission to help students reach their greatest potential.
I want to talk about the SATs now. And for the record, I contacted College Board and I wanted someone from College Board to be on this panel to talk about the SATs firsthand. And I never heard back from them. But SATs, now a lot of colleges are test optional. What does that mean? What are you really looking for? And if someone did take the SATs, how do they know whether or not they should submit their score? Is there a threshold if it's high enough? I want to hear from all of you with your different perspectives on what you advise kids in this situation. And Marguerite, let's begin with you from a college perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, going test optional, that's been the trend over the past several years. More and more colleges are going test optional, but obviously the impetus of COVID certainly changed the whole landscape of testing. And many colleges decided that they had no choice because students just didn't have the opportunity for testing. So right now, colleges that have gone test optional are considering the option of staying test optional, or will it just be for 1 year? It's a bigger college-wide decision to go test optional long-term. For this year, many colleges did it as an emergency type of a situation. So colleges need to pretty much decide if they will stay test optional. And students who did have the opportunity to take exams like SAT and ACT, at Molloy, we are encouraging them to submit. What we are telling students is that we will in no way allow the test scores that they submit to jeopardize their admission or their scholarship. We will only use it to enhance it. So it's only to their benefit at Molloy to provide test scores. I think most colleges like Molloy realize students, a lot of them didn't have an opportunity for test prep. Those that are taking the SAT and ACT are, some of them are only going to have the opportunity to take it once because of limited opportunities, so they can't super score. So you certainly can't compare it to scores from years past from students submitting test scores. And there's just a different anxiety level. Some students are finding out the night before that the test is canceled that they were taking the next day. So they're so anxious that you really can't hold them accountable for a score that maybe doesn't reflect as high as they normally would have scored. So we encourage students to absolutely submit them, and it will only benefit them. Of course, if there are more competitive colleges, students should probably check with those individual admissions offices and ask them that question: how are they using SAT or ACT scores that are submitted?
Bethany, also from the college perspective, what are you hearing and seeing with your applicants and your students, and what is your correspondence with colleges about SAT scores and how they impact some of your students?
So from the college perspective, I don't have anything different to add than what Marguerite has already offered. I think that's generally echoes exactly what I'm hearing on the college front. What my role has really been with students is to help relieve some of that anxiety. And so I really have doubled down on educating them around what holistic admissions means. I hosted a week-long college application week for many students across the country that plugged in, where every single day of the week I focused on a different aspect of the application, so that they knew how to put that particular element together so that it could really outweigh or overshadow the SAT that they did or did not, they may or may not had to report. So it's really about working with them to understand that you're more than a test score. Let's focus on some of these other areas. If you do have an SAT exam or ACT exams report, I did come up with a handout where they could do a self-assessment to determine whether or not they should report it. As to echo again what Marguerite said, that it can help. It can certainly help if you scored a particular way. But again, I don't want you to worry about the test. Let's worry about your essay. Let's worry about getting great recommenders to provide social proof that you are an awesome, amazing student. Let's make sure that you have a great activities resume to report out on. Let's focus on those parts. So let's not focus on a test that may or may not happen.
And Frank and Anthony, from the high school perspective, what are students, I'm sure they have lots of questions about these standardized tests, and Marguerite mentioned students signing up and then it's canceled the next day. What are your thoughts, and what are you students?
We gave an SAT in October, we gave one in November, and the difference this year is kids are grateful. They actually thank me for hosting an SAT. If it was, something like a parade or something. But we sense that, though. We sense these kids have prepared and they're ready to go, and they want the chance. They want the chance to do it. I like Bethany's idea about that self-assessment. A lot of kids just come to us and they say, well, should I report or should I not report? And if it's like playing a card in a game. I mean, if it enhances your candidacy, then you play it. They're not always sure if it indeed will do that. And that's where, the individual comes in, when you see what colleges they're applying to and what the mean of that college in terms of an SAT or ACT might be. But I find that the kids are, they've taken our advice. They're preparing. And so they don't want that preparation to go to waste. And they want the opportunity to show what they know, what they learned.
And Anthony, with your students?
Yeah, it's been, it's kind of amazing. The SAT and ACT, they're so ingrained in our psyche that now that we don't have to submit them, that almost causes its own form of stress. Well, what does this mean now? But to piggyback off what Frank said, I think if you're a student and you're wondering, your district most definitely has Naviance or some other college tracking data system where you can log in, maybe with the help of your counselor, and check years past for some of the schools that you're interested in and see what the median accepted SAT and ACT are. And our general advice has been if your scores are close to what they were accepting last year, then go ahead and submit them. And like Marguerite said, it's only going to help you. It's not going to hurt you. But to Bethany's point, to accentuate and really strengthen the other parts of the application, I think are key this year. Okay, well, maybe we're going test optional, but now we have to focus on your essay, and that has to be dynamite. And we have to focus on those supplemental questions, and we have to demonstrate our interest, which is one of those buzz terms in the college world. We need to show that demonstrated interest in other ways. So if a college or university is asking you quote unquote optional supplemental questions, nothing is optional this year. You need to answer them all, and you need to put maximum effort into those questions, and you really need to separate yourself from the other students that are applying.
Give us some of your creative ideas, because we did a panel here on Herald Inside LI on sports and applying to college in sports and high school sports and college sports and how they're impacted, and because they were canceled in Nassau and Suffolk counties. And some of the sports coaches said that kids got really creative. They took videos on their front lawn of them dribbling a soccer ball, and then they contacted the coach on Twitter. Like, they did really cool things. So it just got me thinking in terms of these ideas on how to encourage kids to do this supplemental questions and optional questions and how to get creative. What are some of these creative tips that you may give to students that are different this year than they had been in the past?
Yeah, I think a couple of the ones you just mentioned are great ideas. I think about the schools with performance art, and they use a website called Accepted, where students can submit a portfolio of their work. YouTube is very easy to navigate for kids these days, and you could make a website, your own YouTube channel to kind of show some of your talents. But really, I think to focus on the individual school and college, and if there are supplemental questions, to go deep into the website, into the programs that are offered, to look into the curriculum, at a school. If you're interested in a major and you're going to put a major down on your application, talk about some of the courses that are in that strand, and why you're interested in studying that major at that school. That's going to show that even though you might not have been able to visit physically, you're still really investing yourself into that college, and you're still trying to let them know that you really want to go there.
We're trying not to steer kids to write about COVID necessarily. There's going to be a ton of COVID essays, but some of our kids really showed a lot of resilience, and they have stories within their families of how they've had to step up and how they adapted to this in a positive way. And so we've encouraged that kind of essay that shows resilience, that shows empathy, that shows their adaptability. When they had to study at home last spring, it was like everybody was a college student at once, and they had to motivate themselves, and they had to structure their day and so on. And some of our kids did it exceptionally well, and not just Wantagh High School and Calhoun High School, but I really think across the island. And if they can comment on that, and feel free to agree or disagree, that those have been powerful essays for us.
Marguerite, have you seen some of these essays that students have submitted? And
we have this. It's certainly been a year where students have really, I think, been more vulnerable than ever before. Yeah. Students are not afraid to say what they're feeling, be it about COVID, social justice, whatever it might be. They're really expressing themselves in various ways. And it's really great to see. They talk about the silver linings of COVID. I think that's really one of them.
Sure.
Students are really just more likely to be more vulnerable and put themselves out there. From a college perspective, what we like to see is that students really want to come to Molloy or to whatever school they're applying to. So, we like to see, we have colleges like the students were thrown into this and had to find new ways to reach students because they couldn't come to the campus and they couldn't step foot on. There's nothing like walking onto the college campus and saying, oh, this is really where I belong. They're missing that opportunity. So colleges had to be creative and come up with ways to bring the college experience to them. And colleges have been doing that with, videos and all types of virtual sessions. So when we see students have opened up our emails and have attended a virtual freshman admission session and have come to a virtual open house, we say, we're looking at an application, we say, wow, this student really is interested in Molloy. And that's really comes across to the college as well.
Bethany, what do you advise your kids? Have you seen anything that stands out in your mind that you would advise other students to do?
I think just, again, echo what other panelists have said, just I encourage them to be as authentic and vulnerable as possible. I've seen some of the essays that I've seen, I'm like, I'm just gonna be real. Kids on Long Island get a bad rap as being entitled, spoiled, haven't really experienced life. And so when I compare the essays that I've seen this year written compared to those that were written in previous years, I just am floored, because I feel like, the level of sensibility to what's happening in the world, beyond COVID-19. There is an essay question this year in the Common App where students can address the COVID-19 question. But for the Common App essays, I've seen things written about social justice issues, race, gender issues, sexuality, things that I think in previous years they would have been afraid to write about, but given where we are in the world, they're just like, I want to be real. I want to really expose who I am and what my thoughts are on this. And it's just been, for me, extremely inspiring.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's what we see on social media, how everyone really shares everything and everyone's documenting everything. So it's great. And when you said Long Island kids, I know we have a bad rap. I'm a Long Island kid. So it is great to shine us in a positive light. So we have a lot of questions here, so I want to make sure I get to a lot of them. We talked about ACT and SAT being optional. So that's something that colleges will decide. Someone asked if it will continue to be optional. So that decision, I assume, will be made as time goes on and we see what happens. The timeline, please discuss the applying to college timeline. How early should you start reaching out to colleges? When should you apply? When should you start applying for scholarships? What's the timeline? Bethany, when do parents come to you?
I have parents come to me as early as 9th grade. 9th, 10th. The bulk of them come in the spring of junior year, which is a little late. But I have programs that fast track them into, a list, into, getting together the essay. Some people come as late as senior year. It's really all over the spectrum when they come.
And in the high schools, Frank and Anthony, do you start having these conversations? Frank mentioned the 8th grade, there you go, middle school rather, you have some of these conversations, but when do you seriously sit down with students and start having these conversations and include their parents?
Is it to prevent the overwhelming stress that can sometimes be associated with the process from creeping in too soon? We try to focus on academics and success and participation in extracurricular sports, for 9th and 10th grade. And we really try to have that be the focus of the kids. Get involved in school, have fun, get involved socially, and don't worry, we're going to help you through the college process. It's kind of our message those first 2 years. And then in the winter of junior year, we host a parent college night in January, where we lay out the nuts and bolts, as we say, of the process, what needs to get done and when, and what constitutes a completed college application and who's responsible for what. And that's usually about a 90-minute presentation. Following that presentation, we'll start to have individual meetings with the counselor and the family to talk about the students list, how that's going to develop their plans for college. And that will lead them into the summer, where each student has a timeline and a checklist of things to get done and when. We give them a little summertime homework so that hopefully by the time they get back in September, they've got a lot of the process done, because in September you have your AP classes starting, your college level classes starting, your senior experience internship. And if you wait for the September of your senior year, it's going to get really busy really quickly. So we try to have the kids really prep and plan for spring and summer of junior year.
Frank, similar?
That's our timeline too. We want the kids to come into their senior year with having some tasks completed. But the conversations that we have early, I fully agree with Anthony. Kids are under enough pressure. We don't want to be part of that problem. So really our college nights early on in eighth grade and even the one in 10th grade is more about having your child grow into a college student by, working independently and developing those college kinds of traits. And then we talk about majors, just so that we don't have that conversation 15 months before they land on a college campus. I mean, we try to just have conversations about careers, college majors, and things like that. But in terms of how Anthony calls it the nuts and bolts, we really try to get them started in the second half of junior year.
It's really hard for kids to pick their major. Like, look what I'm doing now, and I studied chemistry. That was my college. So it's really hard for students to pick their major. How do you encourage them to find what they're passionate about at such a young age when so much can change in their life?
That used to be a goal of ours, and we let go of it because I think it's unrealistic to have, now we talk about the uncertainty of everything,
right.
Have a child pick a vocation for the rest of their lives, but instead to understand clusters of careers and clusters of majors, and to visit a place like Molloy, even casually before their junior year, and say, oh, this college offers nursing, and it offers liberal arts, and it offers business, and okay, then it gets at least a student thinking about clusters, and then they at least know what's on the menu, so that by the time they really have to choose something, they'll choose a place that has maybe their top 3 or 5.
We also, our students on Long Island are so lucky because there's so many colleges. They have so many resources right at their fingertips. So Molloy and all of our peer institutions offer so many pre-college programs, 9th, 10th graders, exactly to Frank's point, to expose them to careers in STEM or to careers in communications and marketing, so that students can get a sense before they're in 11th or 12th grade of, I never thought about this career. I never knew allied health was a career. And this exposes them to different things and gives them the opportunity then to go back to their guidance counselors and say, if I really want to do this career in allied health, what sciences should I be taking in 10th and 11th and 12th grade? That's the important part of the college readiness conversation at that level, I think.
Now, Marguerite, Frank mentioned nursing, and someone submitted a question specifically for Molloy. Please explain your nurse practitioner program and if you accept transfer credits from pharmacy school.
So I will read the different nurse practitioner programs. There are many of them. I don't want to miss any of them. So our degree in nursing specialties, for contemporary nursing, we have tracks in the family nurse practitioner, adult gerontology, primary care nurse practitioner, adult gerontology, acute care nurse practitioner, family psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and pediatric nurse practitioner, primary care. So those are all the different nurse practitioner tracks that we offer for students to specialize in. They're flexible, they're hybrid. They're typically completed in about 3 years on a part-time basis, and we do not accept any transfer credits into those programs.
There you go, whoever asked that question. Now, another question, is it worth the time and money invested in SAT prep when the test may not even be considered? What would you advise someone asking that question? And that is really for anyone who wants to answer that question about SAT prep.
Well, I can
Go ahead,
I can jump in and let you know that our district partner, Kaplan Test Prep, they're going to be operating primarily online this year. So I have no doubt that their online offerings will be very, very helpful to students. But the flip side to that is the student is going to be doing a lot of self-directed work and a lot of self-directed study for these exams now. So if your plan is to still take them, and I certainly wouldn't advise taking them off the table as far as whether or not you should take them. I would still advise you to plan on taking these exams to give yourself the most options. I've often found that a lot of these programs will We'll give students practice sections under timed conditions and under proctored types of conditions, meaning turn off your phone, turn off the TV, go to a quiet room with a book and a pencil. You could take a practice section of the SAT or the ACT. When time is up, you go back, you grade it with the answers that they give you in the back of the prep book, and you repeat that process. And every once in a while, every few weeks, you take a full-length practice exam and you do the same thing. You evaluate it, you grade it yourself. And I think if you get used to the timing of these exams and the types of questions that they're going to ask you, students that are motivated and self-directed can do a lot of great prep on their own in the privacy of their own home. But it's all about timing yourself and mimicking those test day conditions, which are very sterile and very different than what we're used to taking tests in a high school.
Now, are those test taking conditions like they were? Can do a group of students come into the auditorium and take the SATs like I did? Is that the same thing during COVID? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so like at Wantagh, we did offer the SAT and the ACT throughout the fall here at Calhoun and Mepham and Kennedy. And we typically had students in smaller classrooms for the exams because we wanted to limit the number of students in our rooms. We also had the desks spaced 6 feet apart as per College Board regulations. And we also had partitions up. So we tried to make it as safe and as spacious as possible. To answer your question, no, we're not in the big auditorium, but we're still offering the exams, and we're going to try and offer those tests as much as possible in the spring, if we're able to.
Frank, at Wantagh, I think Anthony mentioned Wantagh, but that's what your high schools come together and they offer the test. Right?
We have, and it's, smaller classrooms, we need more proctors and things like that. So I buy more bagels, that's a little part of it. But I believe in the preparation, and we have a similar program to Calhoun, and we have method test prep. And what I strongly advise is for kids to use that online program to just figure out what the test is all about before they plan on taking a course or get a private tutor. And because they could, hand over a few $100 to a private tutor and really not even understand the test yet. So I think it's a good idea to get that preliminary preparation out of the way, but we wouldn't have our athletes take the football field without some kind of preparation. It's the same thing with the SAT and the ACT. If our kids can score grades on an SAT, scores on an SAT that are commensurate with their or exceed their grades, they've enhanced their candidacy. So we have to promote it. It's just those tools are out there. I think a game changer years ago was when score choice began, because now a student can do this with impunity. They can take a test and they can take it again, and they could mix and match scores, and they can hide. They don't have to send them at all if they're not commensurate with their abilities. So I think that was a great thing that the ACT and SAT put together years ago. And parents, we all the guidance departments on Long Island, I'm sure, tell our parents about score choice. And I think it's increased the availability to a lot of students taking it.
Yeah, Method Test Prep has been a great, I'm sorry to jump in. Method Test Prep has been a great company for our students in the past as well. And a really nice thing that they do that they offer through Method is full-length practice SAT and ACT, and then they grade it for you. So if you're the type of student where you're like, I'm not sure I can do this at home by myself, you can go to Method Test Prep. They'll give you a full-length practice exam. They'll give you your scores. And it's also a great way if you're a student who's wondering, am I going to be, am I more aligned with the SAT or the ACT with my learning style? You can go and take a practice test, see which one you score higher on as a diagnostic, and then you can tailor your prep. And then if you're going to go and pay for the tutor or pay for the specialized class, you have more information to make a better informed decision.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we have any other questions. Is there an online platform that has a comprehensive list of schools across the country that includes information about them? when I was applying to college, it was the book. It was the thick book, and each college had a page in the book. So is there an online platform that does that?
I like to refer students to niche.com. That's a really good one. It gives schools various grades, and they can go deeper into the neighborhood that the school's in and really learn all these cool stats. And then if you're a real nerd and you want to geek out, then you could go to the federal government has a site called College Navigator, which is very comprehensive and includes like all the colleges, and you can input different criteria that you're looking for, and it will spit out a list of schools for you.
The government, what was the first one? Niche?
Niche.com.
Okay, that answers that question. Let's see if there are any other questions or if there's any final thoughts as we wrap up here. We have a few minutes to go. Any final thoughts from our panelists on advice that you would give to parents, high school seniors, high school juniors, anyone freaking out during this time on, you know, takeaway messages about applying to college?
I would say don't be shy. You know, Frank talked about shaking the leaf from the tree. Don't be shy. You know your counselor now for 4 years. I know I speak for every counselor, you know, on the island when I say we feel what you're going through. We're going through it ourselves with our own families, the stress, the anxiety, but we're so eager to help you and to support you through this process. We're going to get through it together. We're going to make sure that everything gets packaged perfectly for you. But if you're wondering and if you're stressed, just reach out to us and we will get right back in touch and we'll help you out.
That's a great message, Anthony. And the same could be said, I think, from the college perspective. Don't be hesitant to reach out to colleges and ask your questions. We know that you're really struggling right now in this whole virtual environment with the college search. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and reach out. Many colleges are offering campus tours where you can get really good information. Some of the best information to students comes from peer students, so students that are at the colleges. So don't be afraid and reach out and ask your friends, where are you going to college? Where did your brother or your sister go to college? What was that like? And get as much information as you can. It's out there and people are willing to help.
We have another question. Does an IEP help with college admissions? The question. IEP. Does having an IEP help with college admissions?
Well, having an IEP is important if a student needs services. So if a student needs additional services, providing a college with an IEP helps us to figure out what services the student will need. And to also to let them know if the college offers those services. I mean, some colleges have special programs for students depending upon any types of learning disabilities. Some colleges merely offer services. So it's important that they do provide the IEP to make sure they get whatever services they need.
Any other concluding thoughts? And someone asked if I'm going to post those websites. Yes, the websites that Bethany mentioned, we'll post everything on our website along with the recording of this webinar for anyone that cares to watch it again or share the link with any of your friends, family, colleagues, or your kids. Any other final thoughts on applying to college?
I'll just say that those who win at this whole admissions and financial aid game are those who get started early. So at the very latest spring of junior year, and then also those who are organized. So make sure that you keep everything, every email correspondence, every document that you receive, and that you organize it and you go through this whole process methodically.
Awesome. Great.
To say, you know, for those students out there that are either juniors or they're seniors, we're talking a lot about your future and have hopes for your future, and things are gonna brighten up, but enjoy the present. Enjoy and try to find joy in every day in your school, in the experience that you have. I hope that you can look back on your junior year and your senior year and still have fond memories. These are years none of us will ever forget, but I hope that you remember the good memories. Enjoy every minute.
That's really nice. Thank you. Thank you, Frank, Marguerite, Anthony, Bethany. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who's watching, and I'll put up this slide that shows our website, and that's our email address. The emails come to me directly. So if you have any questions, comments, or compliments, you can send them to that email address there. liherald.com/InsideLI is our website. InsideLI@liherald.com is our email address. Thank you again to Molloy College for sponsoring tonight's webinar, to our panelists, to everyone, and good night. Thank you.